we'd like to acknowledge that this podcast is being performed on the Toronto traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit.
And we'd also like to acknowledge that this podcast is being filmed on the traditional Miami lands of the Tequesta peoples and the Miccosukee peoples. We highly encourage you to check out and learn more about these Indigenous groups. They're fascinating. Thank you very much and enjoy the podcast. Good evening, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the Cross Continents Chat Sports Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Rachel Bishop, joined by my friend and colleague, Charlie Wayman. He's in Miami, Florida. I'm in Toronto, Ontario. And there's a lot to unpack this week that's happened in the world of sports. So let's get right to it. So first question, Charlie. Now that we've seen, obviously, pretty much all the major North American sports leagues, MLS is actually playing tonight, but all the major North American sports leagues, we've seen WNBA, NBA, NHL, and MLB. We've seen several games postponed as players have boycotted or walked out. We even saw Kenny the Jet Smith walk out of the TNT inside the NBA set. Where do the sports leagues go from here? What do you think is the next step after these protests and these boycotts and these cancellations?
I think this is simple. I'm somebody who loves sports. I'm somebody who was very upset and pissed off that because of COVID-19, we lost sports. I understand why, don't get me wrong. But we lost sports, and that was just brutal. And simply because of racial injustice, because the lawmakers seemingly don't really care about this issue, we're going to lose sports again. And it jeopardized sports. Obviously, they're back now, but they jeopardized sports. This isn't, and it's funny how it's just politics. Andre Iguodala said it right. This issue is not a political issue. This isn't a political agenda. This is a human rights issue. This is a human issue. And for whatever reason, these lawmakers, after everything going on, after the protests, after the violence, after, heck, even a 17-year-old kid gunning down and shooting protesters, when is it going to end? When is it going to stop? Enough is enough. Myself and other sports fans want to see sports, but we want to see diversity in these sports. We want to see people being treated properly in these sports and everywhere else. So, in my opinion, I don't really think it's much of the league. Of course, the league and the owners should be promoting, but those rich billionaire owners that own these teams also have connections. I am sure they have connections with lawmakers and politicians in Washington or at their local level, whatever it is. But those owners and billionaires got to talk to the politicians, in my opinion, say, hey, guys, come on. Change your laws. Do police reform. Defund the police. What I mean by defunding the police is taking away some of their money from other things and just focusing on the things that they should be doing. Mm-hmm. Okay, police officers don't need tanks.
No.
They don't need military-grade weapons.
No.
So, in my honest opinion, if anything the NBA should do is that the owners should be talking to their buddies and their contacts that are in the political system to fix this. I'm sick of this stuff. Everybody's sick of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Everybody just wants this stuff resolved. It's terrible that in this country they have to squabble over human rights, over just being nice to somebody else and eliminating racial hatred toward each
Mm-hmm.
other. And to me, just let's do it. We're ready to go. Let's get it done. Let's just get back to somewhat of our lives where we can enjoy our sports, where we can respect each other the way it is. And, I really, I thought about it at first, but I really applaud the players for this, for stacking up to this too, for boycotting. Technically, it was more of a strike than a boycott, but they're calling it a boycott. But with the players, a reason they were back so soon, this is the other thing that bugs me. The reason they were back so soon, only after a couple of days, is probably money. They realized there's going to be financial stipulations for them walking out of the games, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think over the weekend, there would have been way more money. And then, which leads to me, okay, so you're boycotting, but you're boycotting, you're stepping out, you're doing this thing for racial injustice, I get you. But you come back real quick just because of money.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me is like, okay.
Well, I think
An interesting way to put it, because the majority, not the young NBA players, but the majority of NBA players, I'll take the most extreme example, LeBron James,
mm-hmm.
you don't have to worry about money. LeBron James actually made it admirable saying cancel the rest of the season. That's actually a valid point, because for him personally, he can afford it.
Yeah.
He doesn't need more money.
No.
But of course, for younger rookie NBA players, they don't have that kind of money. So it's understandable why they should continue, or they should want to continue.
Apparently, too, a big reason why they decided to continue was that they made a lot of they had a lot of discussions with the NBA, and this is a bigger issue. This is something that Anson Carter brought up about voter suppression. All the NBA arenas are going to be offered as voting stations for the upcoming election, which the players are able to get that somehow in the meeting that they had like yesterday. And that was one of the kind of concessions that the league made for them coming back starting tomorrow, Saturday, August 29th, was that they're going to use the NBA arenas as voting stations so that more people have the opportunity to vote, because as we know, voter suppression is really big, and that's usually amongst visible minorities. And going back to your point about the owners, I think
it's not just because of the voter suppression. The biggest voter suppression now is because the president of the United States wants to get rid of mail-in voting. So another reason they're opening the polling station is if he succeeds in getting rid of mail-in voting and discounting mail-in voting, it's another big time area where people can go out and vote. Because what Fidel Castro did in Cuba, like what all the dictators do is voter suppression. And guess what the president of the United States is looking to do?
Well, that's what's happening in Belarus right now as well.
If everybody voted, he wouldn't win. That's
what's happening in Belarus right now too. And just going to your point about the owners, I know that in the NHL, at least, a lot of the big time owners, I'm pretty sure, are Republican donors. So that you bring up a really good point. If they were Republican donors, they could all of a sudden they stop donating money to the Republican Party. The Republican Party, they're going to change their views really quick because they want that money, right? So I'm pretty sure Mayor Lemieux, who owns the Pittsburgh Penguins, partially, I'm pretty sure he's a Republican donor. So it's up to him. He could be one of these guys who's outspoken. He's a pretty outspoken owner. It can be up to him to say, look, I'm not going to donate money to you until you change your policies. But I think, what do you think to those people who say, like, oh, it's not the league's fault. Like, why are you boycotting the league? And it's not just Black people that face injustice. What about the Latinos and the Native Americans, or in Canada, we call them Indigenous people? Like, what do you say to those people who are kind of skeptical of the cause, or say we don't know really what boycotting is going to do because it's not the league's fault that, obviously Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times and paralyzed?
Well, what I would say is also the NBA players are not boycotting to stop this. They're not. That's not their job. Everybody knows their job is to play basketball, but also their job is to be a role model. That is their side job that nobody talks about, is that they are a role model to people in the community, not just to kids who want to grow up playing basketball. They used their NBA bubble platform to just tell everybody, we're with you. We're hearing what's going on, even though, I'll be a little facetious here, even though we're in a bubble and we're getting paid highly and we're getting absolutely world-class treatment right now. We are with you. We will support you. We will not stand for this. This stuff needs to stop. And that's the job. Their job isn't to fix to fix civil rights in the U.S. It's the community's job and the people's job. They're just voicing their support, and that's the way that I see it. And yes, visible minorities. Let's look. Take First Nations peoples and Native Americans. Absolutely, and I'm expecting a movement to show up as well. The Latino population. It's basically any population that's not Anglo-Saxon has been oppressed at some point in U.S. history.
Yeah.
The Latino population still is, with the immigration issues in this country, and in the past have been treated horribly. And what's going on with them right now is that, there are more Latin Americans, there are more Latinos in the United States than there are African Americans. So now what's happening is the Latinos are going, wait a second, we're doing all these marches and we're doing all these stuffs for Black Lives Matter. Latinos, let's do this. So there's already a movement that's already starting with this, and it's going to be spreading awareness. And if I were to say them, do what they did. That's the way I see it. If I'm telling those minorities, do what they did. Protest, boycott, leave your job, whatever. Well, with reason, but do what you need to do. Do what they did, because right now is a time for your voice to be heard.
Okay, so as someone who's partially Latin yourself, would you do that?
Yeah. Yes, I would. I'm someone who, if I really believed in a cause, I would do something like that. I would definitely have to do my research first, and definitely think about what this movement is and what it's standing for. Like, I'm not just gonna go out and do it. I'm definitely gonna look into it. But if there was a demonstration happening in Miami, something like that, yeah, I'd go. I'm half Latin, of course. Absolutely, because I've seen it, I've experienced it myself, and I've seen it. So, absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note, kind of hate to end it on such an abrupt note, but we are at a time, so we do have to move on. But I think that was a really good discussion, and we could talk about this all day, but we got to talk about other stuff. But I think you brought up some really good points. So now we're going to go on to Charlie's segment, where he does sports spectacles. And so obviously now everything's out of whack because all the schedules got moved around, but they just released them today. So I think you can still talk about the games a bit. So Charlie's going to talk about his sports spectacles games for the upcoming week.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rachel. This one's going to be really short. It's going to be really easy this week. But since NBA is back, definitely check out those games. Not necessarily, definitely check out like the Milwaukee Bucks series because we know that the Orlando Magic can beat them. But chances are Milwaukee will beat them unless there is a magical comeback or the Greek Freak gets hurt, which will be very interesting because after the Milwaukee Bucks win this game, they will be facing the Miami Heat in the second round of the playoffs. And I can't wait. That is going, in my opinion, in the East, that is going to be the matchup. This is going to be the matchup of the year, in my honest opinion. But definitely also check out Toronto and Boston. That one is going to be an absolutely amazing game. Pascal Siakam, Jason Tatum, what can go wrong or what could go right? So definitely check out the NBA. And then aside from just the matchups themselves, definitely check them out for not necessarily their demonstration, but their increased form of awareness towards the Black Lives Matter movement. Because I think there's going to be some more stuff, and it's not going to be just the T-shirts, but I think there's going to be some really interesting tributes that should be very impactful. And those are pretty much my sports spectacles for the week. I could also add into hockey. Hockey will look to resume as well, so definitely check out those matchups, especially Vancouver and Vegas. That should be a very interesting matchup.
That's been a good series.
Yeah, and I'm really liking what Vancouver's doing right now.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely check out Those are my sports spectacles.
All right. Thank you for that, Charlie. Now we're going to go into our second topic, which is about hockey. So that's a good segue into our second topic here in this podcast. And the topic is, after the surprising loss of the Washington Capitals and to the New York Islanders in the qualifying round, so they didn't even make the playoffs, and they fired their head coach now, Todd Reirden. Where do the Capitals go from here? You have Ovechkin needs a new contract in 2 years. Braden Holtby, the starting goalie, is a UFA. What should they do? And go.
Well, I really don't think they have to, press the panic button, dismantle the whole team. I really don't think they need to do that. But what they really need to focus on is who's going to be their starter in net. Obviously, Braden Holtby is, like you mentioned, he's available, and he's going to want money. But the thing with the Washington Capitals is that their bargaining chip is, you won us a Stanley Cup. Yeah, you're great in the playoffs. But also in the regular season, you just don't, his numbers are not great. They're pretty terrible, actually. They're actually worse than most backups in the NHL. I really think they need to look at another goaltender, maybe do a tandem system. So have a goaltender during the regular season, then have Holtby in the playoffs. The other thing I think they need to look at is also a future. Start looking at the future without Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom. Those two guys have been carrying that team for many, many years. And, they're on the wrong side of 30. Alex Ovechkin will probably finish his career in Washington. That's what I imagine, at least. Same with Nicholas Backstrom. And you got to think of something without those two. Yes, you've got Evgeny Kuznetsov, who, he's young and he's still very good. But you need somebody else. You're going to need another top center to take Nicholas Backstrom's spot. So definitely I would look into that as well. Also, they did fire their head coach. While there are some notable names in the head coaching market, there aren't a crazy amount of coaches that I think would be a great fit for the Washington Capitals. I'm guessing out of all of them, to be honest, Bruce Boudreau already was the Capitals coach, so I highly doubt they'll go for him. Peter Laviolette, maybe. You do have the greatest goal scorer of all time. That could be a possibility. Gerard Gallant would honestly be the best fit for this team. But it also depends, if we're starting to, if Alexander Ovechkin who is a very physical player, is, on the wrong side of 30 and, he might leave, could be a time to change the direction of the team, because he's not becoming the player you build around anymore. The man's on the wrong side of 30. You got to start looking for the future. So we'll see what happens. But if I were the Washington Capitals, that's what I would do. Look for a goaltender. Look for a young top center for Nicholas Backstrom and Evgeny Kuznetsov to groom to be in that second line or even first line role at some point. And then look for a potential starting winger to replace Alexander Ovechkin that Ovi can take under his wing and, who knows, maybe replicate some magic. Teach him the secrets of that iconic one-timer that is absolutely impossible to stop somehow, even though he does it every game. That's what I would do if I were them.
And so for the head coach, you would go for Gerard Gallant?
I guess, unless they go for a college coach or something like that. I'd also look for I'm somebody who believes in second chances, so I would also look for a coach like Jim Montgomery, who, if he's ready to go from his stint in rehab with alcoholism, I think he deserves another chance. He's a good coach. He was well liked by players, but of course, he obviously has a serious alcohol issues. And I'm hoping him, that he's able to get through it. He's an accomplished coach, especially in the NCAA. But I'd like to see him have another shot as well in the NHL, for sure.
I would love, just because I think it'd be hilarious, even though I'm not a Capitals fan, by all means, of course, I'm a Penguins fan, they're rivals, so I don't really want this, but I think it'd be hilarious to see Bruce Boudreau coach the Capitals again, and he knows the core of that team. I don't think it'll happen, as you said, just because they've already gone down that road, but he was the coach that really made them good, and I do believe that he is the best coach in the salary cap era. I mean, the stats speak for themselves, and I just think he's had really shitty goaltending on his end, and he's just run into some really hot goalies on the other end, namely Yaroslav Halak in 2010. That Washington Capitals team should have won a Stanley Cup. So I don't think that will happen. But I think someone like Gerard Gallant, I think he'd be a good coach for them because, as you mentioned, he's not a totally analytics coach, which they're not an analytics team. He's a bit of a physical coach, and you do have as long as you have someone like Alexander Ovechkin, who, even though he's obviously a fantastic player and he's an elite player, he always kind of plays with that physical edge. He's been suspended many times. So I think Gerard Gallant would be a good coach for someone like that. And I'm not sure why he's the front runner for Seattle. I mean, if I was Washington, I would snap him up. Peter Laviolette, I think, could be interesting. I think he's a very offensive coach. I don't know if he really fits their system or the way they play, though. I think Gerard Gallant might fit their system more. But beyond that, there's really not too many coaches out there. Then you're looking at college or your AHL coach or, things like that. Apparently, I saw this on Twitter that Washington could be interested in Mike Babcock, which I think would be hilarious if they went down that road to get Mike Babcock. I personally don't think that's the route they should take at all, but I think that'd be really funny. But in terms of, so you mentioned centers. So they actually do have a center that they drafted in 2019, so last year, named Connor McMichael, 25th overall. Of course, he plays for the London Knights. Dale Hunter used to coach the Capitals. He's now the head coach of the London Knights. He's very familiar with the Capitals. That's a machine in terms of junior. They just churn out players, obviously illegally as well, because they've had their issues with paying them and giving them cars and stuff. But Connor McMichael is a center. He's only 19, and he had 102 points in 52 games in the pandemic-shortened season this year, which is absolutely disgusting in the OHL, which is the best major junior hockey league in Canada. And he also played for Canada, the World Juniors. He was very good. He had 7 points in 7 games. 47 goals, 55 points, 102 points in 52 games this season, as I mentioned, and only 26 penalty minutes. And the season before, he had 72 points in 67 games. Still only 19. He's turning 20 in January, and I think that he could be if he pans out and he develops, and they're pretty good with young players, I think he could be someone that develops and kind of takes over that winger role. He's a center, and he could take over. He could take over for Nicholas Backstrom. In terms of wingers, they don't really have much in the pipeline, as you've said. They do have Jakub Vrana, who's a winger who's playing for them right now, who's going to need a new contract in 2022. He's pretty solid. He's a good young player, but he's already on the team. Ilya Kovalchuk, of course, is a winger who will need a new contract. He's not young, but it'd be funny if they re-signed him. And in terms of goaltenders, this is very interesting because they have Braden Holtby, but then they have Ilya Samsonov in the pipeline, who is a really good young goalie. I think he'll turn out to be really good. And he was the starter a lot this year. He outplayed Holtby. Of course, Holtby played in the playoffs because he's usually a good playoff goalie. Wasn't very good this year, but I think that it's an interesting goalie market this year because you have Jakob Markstrom, who also needs a new contract, but he's also 30. Then you also have someone like Frederick Anderson, who's a year away from UFA, so maybe they take a chance on him for a year and let him walk. Then you have Matt Murray, who's an RFA. Penguins won't trade him to a divisional rival, but that's interesting. There's a lot of goalies who need a new contract this season. Robin Leonard would be someone that I would take a hard look at because he's had a great season. Once again, it looks like Marc-Andre Fleury is playing second fiddle to a goalie yet again. So I would definitely take a look at goalies like them, but again, none of these guys are young. So that's definitely an issue. If you want to go for a young goalie, you're going to have to look from within. Matt Murray's really the youngest goalie that you're going to get in the market, but the Penguins, as I said, they're not going to trade him to a divisional rival. But I think that you have Samsonov in the system, and I think he's a really good goalie. But then you still need someone else. So I would try to look for someone that they can mentor and kind of do a tandem system with Samsonov as well. Like Robin Leonard's only 28, so maybe you sign him to a short-term deal for 2 years, maybe, because he's a bit younger than the guys you have now. I mean, Corey Crawford's 35, so he's pretty old. Jimmy Howard's 36. So Cam Talbot's 32 again. Most of these guys are older. So I'd go for maybe someone like Robin Leonard and see if you could get him in the free agent market. He might cost you a lot because I think he's a great goalie. But I think if you have a tandem like Robin Leonard and then Ilya Samsonov, and you sign Robin Leonard to a short-term deal, maybe it takes until he's 30, and then you could have Ilya Samsonov kind of take over and be the starting goalie, and then hopefully you have a younger goalie in your pipeline to back him up. I think that'd be a good course of action for them. I just think that Holtby is going to want too much money, and he's already 30, and I'm not a big fan of giving goalies that are 30 a long-term deal for a lot of money, and I don't think Robin Leonard is probably really going to commend that yet, just because he doesn't have that cachet of Holtby. He's not the big name like Holtby. He's still unproven sort of in the eyes of many people, and Holtby's won a Stanley Cup, so he can boast that in their face and say, I was your Stanley Cup winning goalie, pay me the money, right? That's what Matt Murray is going to do for Pittsburgh. So that's what I would look to if I was Washington, but it'll be a very interesting summer for the Capitals for sure.
I'm not really sure where you got that statement that Bruce Boudreau is the best coach in the salary cap era. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's no way. The guy's never won a cup. He is a terrible playoff performer. Sure, part of it is bad luck, but part of it is probably some of his, his coaching ability and making the wrong decisions. And so I don't know where that comes from. Because I think there's been way more coaches salary cap era.
Advanced stats.
In advanced stats, yeah, but he hasn't won anything.
So
the classic thing where advanced stats might go a certain way, but they don't solve everything. Advanced stats, just because you have advanced stats doesn't mean you're great. Doesn't mean you're amazing.
John Tortorella's won the Stanley Cup. Is he a great coach?
I wasn't talking about him.
I'm just using it as an example.
He's never, just because you have stats doesn't mean you win. Look at Tampa. Tampa got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets of all teams.
Because the goalie couldn't
Tampa got swept by its former coach.
Because the goalie couldn't stop a beach ball.
Well.
And this season, Vasilevsky's a lot better. And they're one game away from beating the Bruins.
For now.
Anyways, with that, we're out of time. As you can see, there's clearly some discord here in this discussion. But I've been a Bruce Boudreau fan since day one, so I'm going to keep harping down this train. I definitely think
that Bruce, gonna win a cup in the NHL.
Definitely think Bruce Boudreau is a fantastic coach. And anyways, we're going to move on now to our next topic, and because we don't want to keep talking about this. We're going to talk about some of the upcoming transfers and rumors and what have yous in the world of sports. Now it's obviously the soccer transfer window has opened, so a lot's going on with that. Of course, Chelsea, once again, is in on basically everything. Don't know where they're finding this money, but Chelsea has now signed Ben Chilwell, defender from Leicester City, who is now going to play with Chelsea, which is interesting because Leicester City was a good team last year. They just missed finishing in the top 4. On the last day of the season, they finished in the top 5, and Chelsea just snuck in there at 4, but it was like going back and forth between those two teams at the end of the season. So that'll be interesting for Chelsea to shore up its defense. Of course, Chelsea's already signed Timo Werner. They've signed quite a few players this offseason. And now they're also interested in Kai Havertz from Bundesliga, who, again, don't know where they're getting this money, but they want to sign Kai Havertz from Bayern Leverkusen, which will be a great asset for them, although they don't really need the scoring. They already have a lot of scoring, but that's definitely something interesting to follow. But the biggest domino that's really fallen in the soccer world is Lionel Messi, the legendary Barcelona player, that's the only club he's ever known, has said he wants to leave Barcelona. And what's interesting about this is that I think his contract expires next year, but he had an out clause in the contract saying that he could void the contract whenever he wanted and basically just leave for free. But Barcelona says that ended in June because that's when the season was supposed to end. Lionel Messi and his camp have said that actually was supposed to go to the end of August because the season got extended because of coronavirus. So now they're actually taking it to Spanish court or Catalonian court, which is really interesting. So it's fascinating to see what will happen there, who wins. Obviously, if Lionel Messi wins and he's a free agent, that opens up doors for pretty much any team in the soccer world to snatch him up because they can sign him for whatever they want. And if not, then other teams will have to pay an exorbitant transfer fee, and not many teams can afford it. I think it's 75 million euros. Maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but not a lot of teams can afford the transfer fee. Especially for a 33-year-old who's probably closer to the end of his career than the beginning. But if he does end up leaving, even if it's for free, Manchester City is the most likely option. However, I've read today that now Juventus is really interested in him, and that could be fascinating because he could play with his rival Cristiano Ronaldo, and that would be quite something to have. Juventus would have two of the greatest players of their era playing together, and Ronaldo and Messi. And of course, they're always it's like Crosby versus Malkin in hockey. It's always Ronaldo versus Messi in soccer. It's always the debate of who's better. And then, of course, in basketball, I guess you had LeBron and Kobe for a long time, too. So it's always fun. It's going to be really interesting to see if they actually do play together. But if he goes to Manchester City, that's just totally unfair. And he would he might not dominate Premier League. You never know. He's never played in Premier League and he's 33. But I think he would just make the team even more nasty, and he'd be reunited with his old manager and Pep Guardiola. And, of course, his Argentine buddy in Sergio Aguero, who is somehow an ageless wonder. I don't know how he does it. It's really annoying. But that's basically what's going on in terms of the soccer world. Once again, lots of rumors. Liverpool is definitely not interested in Messi, which I'm not surprised. But I read something interesting, too, today about Liverpool. One of their midfielders who I really like, Gino Wijnaldum, he is going into the last year of his contract. And after the season, he's a free agent. And there haven't been any talks, apparently. So he could leave for free, which would be really bad. But so that would be interesting to follow, to see what happens there. And what's also something interesting, speaking about Manchester City, is that their former goalkeeper, their former backup, who actually played a lot, I think, during FA Cup and stuff, Claudio Bravo, is going to Real Betis in the Spanish league. So that's interesting that he's going to that league and he's leaving Man City, and that's a good goalie that Real Betis is getting. That's kind of a team no one talks about, but they're pretty solid, I think. And that's really all for this week for the marketplace. Anything you want to add into that this week?
No, not this time.
All right. Any thoughts on Messi and Ronaldo maybe teaming up together?
I don't think he's going to go to Italy. I really think he's going to go to the one manager who actually got him Champions League and actually was most successful, and that is Pep Guardiola. So I think I'm going to see him at Man City. And to be honest, even though I am a big fan of Jorginho Wijnaldum, I wouldn't be totally opposed if he decided to leave, because the problem with Liverpool's midfield and its engine room is it definitely needs a lot more creativity. You need more than Naby Keita to do that. Naby's really shown what he can do post-COVID. He's been absolutely dominant and on fire, so it'd be great to see him continue that for the start of the new Premier League season. But Liverpool need a lot more creativity, even though Jordan Henderson does his thing with passing backwards, same with Fabinho, and that's the type of work. That's the type of player they are. You definitely need some creativity to get it upfield. How are you going to get it to the front three?
Wijnaldum's definitely not that.
He's not. He's a good all-around midfielder, but we need somebody with creativity. And Naby does have injury issues, so if Naby's hurt, we need somebody to do it. Which is why the rumors of getting Thiago Alcantara from Bayern Munich would be huge. And I'd be a big fan of it because that man is incredibly creative, and he would really revolutionize that midfield. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Charlie. And it's a lot to watch in the soccer world. But Lionel Messi announcing he wants to leave Barcelona was, I think, kind of the sports news of the week, really. That was a big shock to everyone. So now we're going to move on to our final portion, which is the fun segment, trivia. And the questions took me a while to think of this week, but they're all pretty different, and I think different varying levels of difficulty. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to start with a really easy one here that I think anyone should know if they follow sports even slightly. Since the Olympics would have happened this year in July, and we'd have Paralympics on right now, which I was actually supposed to go to. I'm still bitter about that, but anyways. So I'm going to do an Olympic question since we're supposed to have the Olympics. So who is the most decorated Olympian of all time, and how many medals do they have, and in what sport?
Most decorated Olympian of all time.
Yeah, like most medals.
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps, that's right. And
Swimming.
How many medals does he have?
Doesn't he have like 8 or something?
Oh, no. He got 8 in 1 games.
Oh, so he has like 20. Oh, okay.
He has 28 Olympic medals, and 23 of them are gold medals. So he's the most decorated gold medalist of all time and the most decorated Olympic medalist of all time. He beat his fellow American Mark Spitz, who I think had like 25 or something. Again, swimming has a lot of medals, but still 28 Olympic medals in 4 Olympic games. It's just absolutely nuts. And the fact that only 5 of them aren't gold is ridiculous. Like, that just shows he was, and we think of Usain Bolt in terms of athletics, he only has like 12 or something. So it's just crazy. But again, more medals in swimming. So now moving on, question number 2. This question I think is also relatively easy. I think you should get this. So this goalie who was inducted into Hockey Hall of Fame, in 1989 is widely considered the best goalie never to play in the NHL.
Vladislav Tretiak.
There you go. Yeah, Vladislav Tretiak. Easy question, I think. But
Yeah.
fun fact about, I thought it was crazy. Fun fact about Vladislav Tretiak, which I didn't know, he did make his way to the NHL after he retired as a goalie coach. He coached the Chicago Blackhawks, specifically Eddie the Eagle Belfour.
Pretty cool.
And that's why Eddie Belfour wore number 20 in honor of Tretiak.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, right? And of course, Eddie the Eagle Belfour, Hockey Hall of Famer himself. So Tretiak not only in the Hall of Fame, he's able to coach Hall of Famers. So pretty amazing. So for sure. Pretty. All right. So. Oh, hold on. Okay. Oh, yeah. So now moving on to the third question here. Some boxing we don't need to talk about, but again, pretty easy. I think you should know this. Whose ear did Mike Tyson bite off during a 1997 boxing match? June 1997 boxing match. Whose ear did he bite off?
No idea.
Evander Holyfield. It was called The Sound and the Fury, and the match was June 28th, 1997, and of course Tyson was banned for biting his ear off. Tyson was a bit of a problematic person, so that's not surprising. All right. So 5th question here. Now we're going into some basketball. Which NBA team holds the record for the most consecutive appearances and most consecutive titles? And bonus points if you can name the year span.
Wait, which team in the NBA has most consecutive appearances?
And like consecutive, so they have the most consecutive appearances, and in this span, they also had the most consecutive titles.
Boston Celtics.
That's right. Yeah. And how many appearances and how many titles?
I would say 11 titles.
In a row?
Well, it was the Bill Russell era, for sure.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, it was like 10 or 11 titles, something like that.
It was 10 consecutive finals. So we all thought that LeBron was bad when he had 6 in a row. Boston had 10 in a row and 8 straight titles in that span from 1957 to 1968, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it's a lot like the Habs. So
yeah, but the Habs only had 5 in a row. They never had 8 in a row.
Different leagues. Different game.
Ridiculous. But moving on now to the final question. It's another pop culture and sports question combined, because you know that I like these. It's really two sports.
Kill me now, folks. Kill me now.
It's really two sports, but it's also pop culture and sports, if you get where I'm going with this. But it's also sports in and of itself. You'll see. So, which former NHL defenseman was previously married to a WWE female superstar?
No idea.
Really? You don't know that?
No. I don't know WWE females. Come on, man.
Sheldon Surrey was formerly married to Barbie Blank, a.k.a. Kelly Kelly, was her WWE name. And they're married from 2011 to 2017. So there you go. Sheldon Surrey of the Anaheim Ducks and Edmonton Oilers.
Good. That is a good form of useless knowledge.
He was a great defenseman, though.
Yes, he was.
But imagine having a wife named Barbie Blank. Anyways, well, that's all for trivia. You you did pretty well today. I think you got 3 questions right?
I know. I'm getting better.
You're getting better. The questions weren't too difficult. You got 3 right. I got 3 right last week. So we're on a roll with our trivias lately. So that's really good. I think you just got the Surrey question wrong and the Mike Tyson one wrong. Yeah, that's it. So you did well. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cross Continents Chats. Once again, I've been Rachael Bishop in Toronto, Ontario, joined by my friend and colleague Charlie Wayman in Miami, Florida. Hope everyone's staying safe out there.